Hi everyone, thank you once again for joining me. Today we are going to be looking at grade 10 finance and growth. We're going to be revising some of the important concepts that you need, things that you need to remember from the whole of grade 10 to take with you into grade 11 learning as well. And obviously the question starts with, what is finance all about? Of course, it's all about interest a lot of the time. So what is interest? Interest is really the money that you earn for lending your money. So for example, if you go to a bank and you invest your money, they give you money back. That money back is what we call interest. It's the fee for borrowing your money. Similarly, if you were to go and take out a loan, you then have to pay interest, and that interest that you pay is the fee that you are paying someone for using their money. Okay, so interest, such an important concept. Entire fields of investment and finance is devoted to just looking at how the interest rates change and how they affect our money. All right, so the two important concepts you learn in grade 10, simple interest and compound interest. Let's start with simple interest. In simple interest, we have shown you that you earn interest only on the initial investment. So what that means, and let's just get our pen up, is that the amount of interest that you earn will stay constant. It doesn't change. You are charged interest, or you receive interest only on, you charge interest only on the amount of the loan, and you will obviously only earn interest on your initial investment. So if we were to graph what simple interest would look like, you would see it would just be a constant line, not a constant line, it would be a constant growth resulting in a straight line graph. Okay. An example of simple interest, let's say that I invest 10,000 Rand for a year with a bank that pays 5% per annum simple interest. So while we're looking at this question, what's also important to note is that simple interest will always be earned on a yearly basis. So we don't deal with months or quarters. With simple interest, all our time periods must be converted to years. So here we just see that our investment has been invested for 1 year. Okay, so I can work out, without using any formula, I can work out how much I am going to gain. They say here I'm getting 5% in that year. So if I take the 10,000 Rand, multiply it by 5%, I see that that gives me 500 Rand. So in that 1 year, I have earned 500 Rand. Okay, so that means that after an initial investment of 10,000 Rand at the start of the year, I'm going to end up with a final amount of 10,500 Rand. So my final amount is my initial amount, which I invested, which was 10,000, plus the interest which I received, which was 500, and that gives me an amount of 10,500 Rand. Of course, that 500 Rand, if you had just taken your money and chose not to put it into a bank, that 500 Rand you would not have earned. So that 500 Rand, that's the gain that you receive for investing your money. Obviously, you only get these gains if you invest your money in a proper financial institution, okay? All right, so now each time we want to work out the amount of money that we end up with, we don't want to go through this long process of first finding out what the interest is every year and then adding it on. That's going to take too long. Imagine if n was 20 and we had to do it 20 times, way too long. So there's a general formula that we have in maths, which is A is equal to P times 1 plus I times n. That's your simple interest formula. Let's go through each of the components of the formula. A is your final amount, or your accumulated amount. P is the initial amount that you invest. I is your interest rate in decimal form. And N is the period in years, so it's the number of years. So if, for example, your money was invested for 18 months, you would have to change 18 months to a number of years. 18 months is 1.5 years. So all you would do is you would take the number of months divided by 12, because there are 12 months in a year, and that will tell you how many years there are in 18 months. Okay. All right, so this general formula is something you should all be quite familiar with by now. It is a formula that you use whenever you want to work out what your final amount will be when you're dealing with simple interest. What's also nice about having a formula that you can work with is that once you know a few of the variables, you can work out the unknown variables. So say, for example, I knew what A was. So let's just say I knew what A was, and I knew what P was, and I knew what I was, and I wanted to find out N. I could do that just by changing the subject of this formula. Okay. All right, so generally, how do we approach any compound interest or simple interest question? We first write down the known variables, so write down whether you know A, P, I, or N. You then write down the formula and substitute the values that you have from your question straight into that formula. Okay, let's have a look at this question. Devet deposits 30,000 Rand. So he's depositing an initial amount into a bank account. So that would be your P value. That bank account pays a simple interest, and you see they've already told you what the rate of interest is, at 7.5% per annum. So I would be 7.5 divided by 100, which would be 0.075. Okay. How many years? So what they want to find out is N. How many years must he invest for to generate 45,000 Rand? So in other words, they're telling you this is what he's getting at the end. So this then is the value of A. So let's see what we've got. We have A, we have the value for P, and we've got I. So obviously what we are solving for is N. Okay, so we're simply then going to substitute into our formula. We've got the value for A is 45,000, the value for P is 35,000, and then it's 1 plus 0.075, which is your interest rate in decimal form, times by N. Okay, we then have to rearrange that formula to get the value of N. So how do we rearrange the formula? Well, you need to strip away everything that's attached to the variable that you want. So I start by dividing both sides by 30,000. So I end up with 45,000 divided by 30,000, which is basically going to give you 45 over 30. And we're going to subtract 1 to get this one out of the bracket. We'll end up with that. And then to get to the value of N, we divide both sides by 0.075. So therefore N would be equal to, and you can just double check this working on your calculator, 45 over 30 minus 1, all divided by 0.075. Okay, when you put all of that into your calculator, you will see that you end up with N is equal to 6 2/3. Now that 2/3, so it's 6 2/3 of a year. But if we want to know exactly how long is that, how long is 2/3 of a year, we need to go further. So what we now have to do is we need to convert 2/3 of a year to a number of months. And the way we do that is we know that there are 12 months in a year, so therefore we take 2/3, so we know what 6 years is, right? We're going to take 2/3 multiply by 12 over 1, and we end up with, 3 goes into itself once, into 12 4 times, we end up with 8. So therefore it will take 6 years, which is your whole number, and 8 months to make 45,000 Rand from 30,000 Rand at a simple interest rate of 7.5% per annum. Okay. All right, guys. So before we start compound interest, I think this is a good point for us to just think a little bit about how simple interest compares to compound interest. So you know that the two are completely different things. In general, in the real world, we use compound interest a lot more than we use simple interest. Simple interest has very few applications in the real world. You will mainly find simple interest being used in hire purchase agreements, and hire purchase agreements are becoming less and less common as well. So most of your calculations, if they don't say anything and they just say the interest rate is 6% per annum, you can assume that they're talking about compound interest. If it is a simple interest question, they will tell you that you are dealing with simple interest. So when you think about things like population growth, inflation, all of those things, all of those use compound interest, not simple interest. And we'll talk about inflation later on in the lesson. Okay, so compound interest, let's talk about that quickly. In compound interest calculations, interest is earned not only on the initial amount that you put in, but also on any accumulated interest. So in our beginning example, we said, okay, we put 10,000 Rand, we ended up with 10,500. So in simple interest, the interest will continually be calculated on the 10,000 Rand, but in compound interest, your interest will keep increasing based on how your final amount changes, because your interest is based on the principal amount plus any accumulated interest. Compound interest is really great for investing money. It's not great if you're taking out a loan, and the reason for that, as I said, is because the amount of interest keeps growing. So if you think about a growing interest rate when you're paying back a loan, not a growing interest rate, a growing amount of interest that you've got to pay back on a loan, that's not great, because you don't want to have to pay more and more money as the term of your loan continues. Okay. The general formula that we use for compound interest, A is equal to P times 1 plus I to the n. The variables have the same meaning as they did in the simple interest calculations, so I'm not going to go over each of those variables again. Okay, let's think about this one. Phil wants to invest 20,000 Rand, so that's his initial amount, at a compound interest rate of 6% per annum, so therefore I would be 0,06. All we do is divide 6 by 100. How much money will be in the account at the end of 5 years? N is equal to 5, and we are looking to find the value of A. All right, so what I want you guys to do is have a look at this example, take down all the variables that we do know and what it is that we need to calculate. Have a look at this example. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll finish off with this example.